The celestial lights of Zephyr Prime's three moons cast long shadows across the ancient temple of spectral light, where Iruwan meditated alone. For 1,000 years, the Zalthor alliance had prospered under the guidance of their prophets, with Iruwan being the most revered of all, half divine and half mortal. He had served as the spiritual beacon for their civilization, his prophecies guiding the desert world through countless challenges. Tonight, however, Iruwan felt a disturbance in the cosmic energies he had spent centuries studying. His slender, pale fingers traced patterns in the sacred dust before him, his large, opalescent eyes reflecting the star charts projected on the temple dome above. The temple's crystal walls hummed with an ominous frequency that only he could perceive. "Something approaches," he whispered, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that seemed to echo from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The temple acolytes stood at a respectful distance, their crimson robes stark against the alabaster floors. None dared interrupt the prophet when he communed with the universe. The Zalthor civilization had not faced a serious threat in generations. Their technological prowess, combined with their spiritual enlightenment, had created a society of unprecedented harmony. Desert cities thrived beneath protective domes. Agriculture flourished in terraformed valleys, and their interplanetary diplomatic corps maintained peaceful relations with neighboring systems. Iruwan's meditation deepened as cosmic visions assaulted his consciousness. He saw ships of unknown design approaching their star system, detected strange transmissions at the edges of their space. The visions were fragmented, uncertain, something unusual for a prophet of his caliber. When dawn broke, casting amber light across the desert landscape, Iruwan emerged from his trance. His normally composed features were troubled, lines of concern etched across his ageless face. "Summon the War Council," he instructed the High Priestess, who had waited through the night. "I have seen what is to come." Within hours, the highest-ranking officials of the Zalthor Alliance gathered in the capital city's Grand Assembly. Military leaders, political representatives, and spiritual advisors filled the circular chamber, their hushed conversations creating a low hum of anxiety. They had not been summoned with such urgency in centuries. General Melkor, Supreme Commander of the Zalthor Defense Forces, entered last. His imposing physique and battle-scarred visage commanded immediate respect. Though the Alliance had known peace for a millennium, they maintained a formidable military force, ready, vigilant, and technologically superior to most known civilizations. "Prophet Iruwan," Melkor acknowledged with a curt nod, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "What threat warrants assembling the full War Council?" Iruwan stood at the center of the chamber, his simple white robes a stark contrast to the ornate military decorations and political regalia surrounding him. "I have glimpsed our future," he began, his voice carrying to every corner without effort. "Outsiders approach our system with unknown intentions. I see conflict, blood, and fire." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Melkor leaned forward, golden eyes narrowing. "You speak of invasion? After 1,000 years of peace?" "I speak of possibilities," Iruwan clarified. "The cosmic threads show multiple paths forward, but many lead to confrontation. I must deliver a prophecy that carries grave implications for our people." The chamber fell silent as Iruwan closed his eyes, entering a light trance state. When he spoke again, his voice carried the unmistakable harmonic resonance of prophetic truth. "If you strike first, they'll never stop." The silence deepened as council members exchanged confused glances. Prophecies were typically cryptic, but this one seemed unusually straightforward. General Melkor stood abruptly. "This is precisely what we needed to hear," he declared, pounding his fist against the stone table. "The prophet has given us clear guidance. We must launch a preemptive strike before these outsiders can threaten our worlds." Iruwan's eyes snapped open. "No, General, you misunderstand. The prophecy speaks for itself, Melkor interrupted. If we strike first, they'll never be able to stop us. A decisive, overwhelming attack will neutralize any threat before it materializes. Ambassador Navan, the Alliance's chief diplomat, rose from his seat. General, with respect, prophecies require careful interpretation. Perhaps Prophet Iruan meant— I know exactly what he meant, Melkor cut in. Our military intelligence has already detected anomalous energy signatures at the edge of the Uranus asteroid belt. Unknown vessels are establishing what appears to be a forward base. Every day we delay gives them time to strengthen their position. Iruan attempted to regain control of the Council. My prophecy was a warning, not a call to arms. The vision shows that aggression will trigger an endless cycle of— Prophet Iruan, Melkor said, his tone respectful but firm. You have fulfilled your sacred duty by delivering the prophecy. The practical application of your wisdom falls to the War Council. We thank you for your guidance. With a subtle gesture, Melkor signaled to his military aides, who moved to flank Iruan, ostensibly as an honor guard, but effectively isolating him from the rest of the council. Members of the High Council, Melkor continued, I propose an immediate strike force deployment to neutralize the unknown presence at Uranus. The prophet's words confirm that a decisive first strike is our best course of action. Iruan watched in growing horror as the council members nodded in agreement, interpreting his prophecy precisely opposite to its intended meaning. When he attempted to clarify, a council guard respectfully but firmly suggested he rest after his prophetic exertion. As the War Council proceeded with tactical discussions, Iruan found himself increasingly marginalized. By sunset, the decision had been made. The Zalthor fleet would launch a surprise attack on the Irani's outpost within 3 cycles. Iruan made one final, desperate appeal before the full council. You misinterpret my words. The prophecy means that if we strike first, our enemies will never stop retaliating. We will trigger an endless cycle of violence that could destroy everything we've built. His pleas fell on deaf ears. General Melkor, with the council's backing, issued a formal declaration. For the duration of this military operation, Prophet Iruan will retire to the sacred meditation retreats in the outer deserts. His spiritual insights are too valuable to risk exposure to war's chaos. It was exile in all but name. As Iruan was escorted from the capital, he looked back at the gleaming spires of Zefra Prime with a profound sense of foreboding. The prophecy had been delivered, misinterpreted, and now set in motion a chain of events he had hoped to prevent. 3 cycles later, the Zalthor attack fleet emerged from hyperspace above the small, rocky outpost on Uranus. General Melkor commanded the operation personally from his flagship, the Righteous Thunder. The alien outpost appeared primitive compared to Zalthor technology, a collection of dome structures anchored to the asteroid's surface, with a handful of small vessels docked nearby. No significant defensive capabilities detected, General reported his tactical officer. Their energy signatures suggest they haven't even noticed our arrival. Melkor's expression remained stoic. Begin the attack sequence. Remember, we must leave no survivors who could report back to their homeworld. This ends today. The assault was brief and overwhelming. Precision energy weapons shattered the dome structures, while specialized boarding teams eliminated pockets of resistance. Within hours, the outpost had been reduced to smoldering ruins. Melkor strode through the debris during the final sweep, observing the alien technology and remains with clinical detachment. Their capabilities were far inferior to our intelligence estimates, he remarked to his second-in-command. This was barely a scientific outpost, not a military forward base. Sir, his officer replied hesitantly. Preliminary analysis suggests these beings were primarily researchers. We've found extensive astronomical data and what appears to be cultural exchange preparations. Melkor frowned. Cultural exchange? Yes, sir. Translation matrices. Historical records of their civilization. It appears they may have been preparing for first contact, not invasion. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across the general's features, but he quickly suppressed it. Regardless, the threat has been neutralized. Prepare the fleet for return to Zephyr Prime. We'll present our complete victory to the War Council. As the Zalthor fleet departed, they failed to notice a small escape pod jettisoning from the far side of the asteroid, carrying 3 survivors and a data burst transmission aimed toward a distant star system. While the military celebrated their victory, Iruan wandered the harsh deserts of Zephyr Prime's outlands. His exile had been formalized. He was forbidden from approaching any major settlement or communicating with government officials. Only a handful of loyal acolytes remained with him, carrying messages to and from the scattered nomadic tribes that existed outside the Alliance's main cities. It was through these nomads that Iruan first learned of strange occurrences along the frontier worlds. Small outposts going silent, supply ships disappearing, isolated settlements reporting glimpses of unknown vessels before communication ceased. "They've begun," Iruan murmured, standing atop a sand dune as the twin suns set. "The retaliation I foresaw." One particular nomad, a wise woman named Lyria, became Iruan's most trusted messenger. Unlike most Zalthor citizens, she had traveled extensively beyond Alliance borders in her youth. "The outsiders are not attacking military targets," she reported after returning from a trading journey. "They strike civilians, infrastructure, communication relays, then vanish before military response arrives. They're employing guerrilla tactics." Iruan observed. "Precisely what I feared. They cannot match our military might directly, so they strike where we are vulnerable, building resentment among our people against leadership that cannot protect them." "The citizens grow restless," Lyria confirmed. "Many frontier settlements feel abandoned by the central government. They say General Malcor promised security after the Irana's victory, yet the attacks only escalate." Iruan gazed into the night sky, tracing the constellations with practiced ease. "Malcor doesn't understand the enemy he's created. They're not seeking military victory. They want justice, and they won't stop until they achieve it." As months passed, the pattern of attacks intensified. What began as isolated incidents evolved into coordinated strikes against strategic targets. The Zalthor military scrambled to respond, but their adversary refused conventional engagement, always striking where defenses were weakest before melting away. General Malcor appeared before the War Council, his previously immaculate uniform now showing signs of hasty preparation. Dark circles underlined his eyes, betraying sleepless nights spent chasing shadows. "These cowards refuse to face us directly," he declared, his frustration evident. "But we've increased patrols along all major trade routes and reinforced planetary defense systems. Their hit-and-run tactics cannot succeed indefinitely." Ambassador Navan, who had initially questioned the Irani strike, spoke carefully. "Perhaps we should consider diplomatic overtures. If we could establish communication—" "Diplomacy," Malcor laughed bitterly. "With enemies who target civilian populations? No, Ambassador. The only language they understand is force. We simply haven't applied enough of it yet." The Council authorized expanded military powers and additional resources for Malcor's counterinsurgency strategy. Martial law extended to frontier worlds. Travel restrictions tightened, and surveillance systems monitored civilian communications for signs of enemy sympathizers. Meanwhile, Iruan had established a modest settlement in the desert, a place of refuge for those displaced by the escalating conflict. Nomads, refugees from frontier attacks, and disillusioned citizens found their way to him, drawn by whispered stories of the exiled prophet who had foreseen it all. "You were right," Lyria told him one evening as they shared a simple meal with recent arrivals. a family whose agricultural settlement had been destroyed in the crossfire of a military response. Your prophecy is fulfilling itself with each passing day. Iruan watched the family's young children playing in the sand, their resilience a painful reminder of what was at stake. Being right brings no satisfaction when suffering is the proof, he replied softly. Over the following weeks, Iruan worked with Lyria to establish a network of observers across the remaining frontier settlements. Through their reports, he began mapping attack patterns, seeking to understand the enemy's strategy and, perhaps, their ultimate goal. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, when a damaged enemy scout vessel crash-landed near their desert sanctuary. Iruan reached the site before military patrols, discovering a mortally wounded alien pilot among the wreckage. With Lyria's assistance, Iruan established rudimentary communication with the dying being. Its physiognomy was startlingly similar to the Zalthor, suggesting a common evolutionary ancestry that the Alliance's xenobiologists had theorized, but never confirmed. "Why do you attack our civilian populations?" Iruan asked, through improvised translation. The alien's response was labored but clear. "You destroyed our first contact mission, killed our scientists, our diplomats, our families. You struck without warning, without provocation. We believed you were establishing a military foothold," Iruan explained, though the justification sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "We were reaching out in peace," the alien replied, its life signs weakening. "Now, we reach out in justice. Your military cannot be everywhere. Your people will suffer as ours suffered, until your leaders answer for their crimes." Before Iruan could respond, the alien activated a small device on its wrist. A holographic display projected detailed tactical information, revealing that the scattered attacks had been mere distractions. The true offensive was being prepared against Zefra Prime itself. "Strike hard," the alien whispered with its final breath. "Break pride, then perhaps peace." Iruan studied the tactical data with growing alarm. The alien force had amassed a significant fleet just beyond the system's detection grid. Their attack would bypass the elaborate orbital defenses by using a gravity well flaw that Zalthor engineers had deemed theoretically impossible to exploit. "We must warn the capital," Iruan decided, knowing it meant breaking his exile. "Thousands of innocent lives are at stake." Lyria nodded grimly. "The military patrols have tightened. Reaching the capital won't be easy, especially for the prophet they exiled." "Then I won't go as the prophet," Iruan replied, removing his distinctive ceremonial garments. "I'll go as no one at all, using the nomad's secret pathways and Lyria's network of sympathizers." Iruan made his way toward Zefra Prime. The journey was arduous, military checkpoints had multiplied, and paranoia had infected the population. Twice they narrowly avoided detection by patrols specifically searching for the exiled prophet, suggesting that Maelkor considered him a threat rather than merely irrelevant. As they approached the capital's outer districts, evidence of the conflict's toll became impossible to ignore. Refugee camps sprawled across once pristine parklands. Security forces patrolled in combat gear. Supply shortages had led to rationing, and propaganda broadcasts continuously assured citizens that victory was imminent, despite mounting casualties. "The Alliance is fracturing from within," Lyria observed as they passed a public square where citizens were protesting military governance. Maelkor promised a swift, decisive victory, but delivered a war of attrition instead. Iruan watched the security forces dispersing protesters with non-lethal but painful sonic weapons. Fear and pride, a dangerous combination in leadership. Maelkor cannot admit his mistake without losing his position, so he doubles down, convincing himself that escalation is the only path to victory. Reaching the central government district proved nearly impossible through conventional means. Military barricades surrounded the administrative complex, with identity verification at every checkpoint. Iruan's face, though not seen publicly for months, would certainly trigger immediate arrest. There's another way, Lyria suggested, after their third failed approach. The underground water recycling system. It connects to the ancient aqueducts beneath the War Council chamber, remnants from before the climate control systems were perfected. How would you know this? Irwan asked, surprised. Lyria smiled mysteriously. Before I was a nomad, I was many things, including a city planning engineer. Not all who wander the deserts do so by birth. The ancient tunnels were claustrophobic and partially flooded, but mercifully unguarded. As they navigated the labyrinthine passageways, distant explosions reverberated through the stone. The first wave of the alien attack had begun. They emerged through a maintenance hatch into a service corridor, adjacent to the War Council's emergency bunker. Alarms blared throughout the complex as military personnel rushed to battle stations. In the chaos, Iruan and Lyria managed to slip into the outer chamber of the council room, where tactical displays showed the unfolding attack. The alien strike force had appeared precisely where the dying pilot's data had indicated, bypassing the primary defense grid through the theoretical vulnerability that Zalthor engineers had dismissed. Now, they were systematically targeting military infrastructure, while a smaller, elite force headed directly for the government district. Inside the council chamber, General Malcor was issuing rapid-fire orders, his composure finally cracking as the carefully constructed defensive strategy collapsed around him. Redirect the orbital platforms. Where is the Third Fleet? They should have intercepted the enemy vanguard by now. A communications officer responded with obvious reluctance. Sir, the Third Fleet reports heavy casualties. The enemy weapons technology has evolved since our previous encounters. They're using our own defense protocols against us. Impossible! Malcor slammed his fist on the tactical display. They're primitive guerrilla fighters, not technological equals. No, Irwan said, stepping into the chamber despite Lyria's attempt to restrain him. They were never primitive. We simply caught their diplomats and scientists unaware at Uranus. Their military capabilities remained hidden. Until now. The council room fell silent as all eyes turned to the exiled prophet. Security officers moved to apprehend him, but Malcor waved them back, his expression a complex mixture of anger and relief. Prophet Iruan, he acknowledged stiffly, your presence violates the terms of your spiritual retreat. My presence may be the only hope of saving what remains of our alliance, Iruan replied calmly. I've had direct contact with the enemy. I understand their motivations and tactics in ways your military intelligence cannot. Another explosion, closer this time, shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling as the lighting flickered momentarily. Our planetary shields are failing, reported a senior officer. They've somehow obtained our modulation frequencies. Malcor's jaw tightened. How could they possibly? Because they've been studying us for months while you chased shadows. Iruan interrupted. Every skirmish, every engagement gave them more data. They sacrificed small forces to test your responses, analyze your tactics, and identify weaknesses. Ambassador Naven, who had maintained a dignified silence until now, stood to address the council. Perhaps we should hear what the prophet has learned. Conventional military approaches have proven insufficient. Malcor looked as though he might object. But another proximity alarm cut through the room. Enemy forces had breached the government district's perimeter. With visible reluctance, he nodded toward Irwan. Speak quickly, prophet. Our time is limited. Irwan moved to the central tactical display, with Lyria following closely. The enemy force is not bent on our total destruction, at least not yet. Their primary objective is capturing key leadership figures. He pointed directly at Malcor. You, specifically, General. Me? Why would I be their target? Justice, Iruan explained. Or their version of it. You commanded the Irani's attack that destroyed their diplomatic mission. They consider you personally responsible for what they view as an unprovoked massacre of civilian scientists and cultural ambassadors. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Many had harbored private doubts about the Irani's operation, especially as more intelligence suggested the outpost had indeed been scientific rather than military in nature. "What do you propose?" Navin asked, while Malcor fumed silently. "A targeted evacuation of civilian populations from the attack corridors, combined with a strategic withdrawal of military forces from non-essential positions." Irawan began, manipulating the tactical display with surprising expertise. "Concentrate defenses here, and here, not to defeat the enemy, but to channel them toward a controlled confrontation point." "You're suggesting we allow them into the heart of our capital?" Malcor objected incredulously. "I'm suggesting we stop fighting the battle they've prepared for, and instead create the conditions for the battle we need." Irawan countered. "They want you, General. Let them believe they can reach you, but on our terms, in a location we control." After heated debate, a modified version of Irawan's plan was implemented. As enemy forces pushed deeper into the capital, Zalthor defenders executed a series of tactical withdrawals, creating the illusion of a collapsing defense while actually consolidating forces around key strategic points. Civilians were evacuated through emergency underground passages, many of which Lyria helped identify from her engineering knowledge. Meanwhile, Irawan worked with Ambassador Navin to prepare a contingency that the War Council knew nothing about, a direct communication channel to the enemy command. The decisive moment came when enemy forces breached the governmental complex, fighting their way toward the War Council bunker, where Malcor ostensibly remained. In reality, the general had been relocated to a secure facility beneath the Temple of Spectral Light, a location with tremendous symbolic significance to the Zalthor people. When the enemy commander entered the bunker, finding it mostly abandoned, a holographic message from Irawan activated. "Your quest for General Malcor leads to the Temple of Spectral Light." The projection stated simply, "The prophet awaits with the one you seek." It was a calculated risk. The enemy forces could simply bombard the temple from orbit, but doing so would destroy their chance for the personal justice they had fought so hard to achieve. Irawan was betting that their desire for symbolic retribution would outweigh tactical considerations. The gamble paid off. Enemy forces converged on the temple but did not attack indiscriminately. Instead, a small strike team infiltrated the ancient structure, navigating its labyrinthine passages until they reached the central meditation chamber. There they found Irawan seated calmly on the prophet's dais, with General Malcor standing rigidly beside him, surrounded by a minimal guard force. The enemy commander stepped forward, removing a helmet to reveal features startlingly similar to the Zalthor, confirming the shared evolutionary ancestry that xenobiologists had theorized. When they spoke, their translator rendered their words in flawless Zalthor language. "General Malcor, architect of the Uranus massacre, you will answer for your crimes against the Talon people." Malcor maintained his military bearing, despite the defeat written across his features. "I acted to protect my civilization from what we perceived as a threat. War produces casualties on all sides." "There was no war until you created one," the commander replied coldly. "Our mission was peaceful. Our people were scientists and diplomats." Irawan rose slowly from the dais, his white robes gleaming in the temple's ethereal light. "And now, we have all paid the price for that misunderstanding. The cycle of violence I foresaw has come full circle." The commander turned toward Irawan, recognition dawning. "You are the prophet mentioned in the transmissions we intercepted, the one who warned against the first strike." "I am," Irawan acknowledged. "My warning was misinterpreted, with devastating consequences for both our peoples. But prophecy reveals possible futures, not immutable fate. We stand now at another crossroads. We came for justice, the commander stated firmly. And you shall have it, Iruan agreed. But consider carefully what form that justice should take. Will executing General Melkor bring back your fallen? Will continuing this conflict heal either of our civilizations? Iruan gestured to Ambassador Navan, who stepped forward with a formal diplomatic proposal. The Zalthor alliance offers reparations for the Irani's tragedy. General Melkor will stand down from military command and participate in a truth commission with representatives from both our peoples. We propose an immediate cessation of hostilities and the establishment of a joint council to prevent future misunderstandings. The enemy commander accepted the document, but remained skeptical. Pretty words cannot undo the destruction your forces unleashed. No, Iruan acknowledged sadly. Nothing can undo what has been done. But consider this. My prophecy stated, if you strike first, they'll never stop. It has proven true for your people. Your retribution has been relentless, exacting a terrible price from ours. He stepped closer to the commander, unarmed and vulnerable. But prophecy need not define our future forever. Someone must choose to stop the cycle, or both our civilizations will continue bleeding until nothing remains but ashes and regret. For a long, tense moment, the fate of both peoples balanced on the commander's decision. Finally, they activated their communication device. Hold orbital bombardment. Maintain positions but cease offensive operations. We are negotiating. The relief in the chamber was palpable, though no one dared celebrate prematurely. Over the next several hours, preliminary terms were established. The Talon forces would withdraw from Zalthor space in exchange for Melkor's resignation and trial. Reparations would be paid for the Irani's victims. A demilitarized zone would be established between their territories, monitored by joint observation teams. Most significantly, cultural and scientific exchange programs, the very mission that the Irani's outpost had been preparing, would finally begin, under strict diplomatic protocols. As dawn broke over Zephyr Prime, casting golden light through the temple's crystal walls, the first tentative peace agreement was signed. It was not a perfect resolution. Too much blood had been spilled for complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. General Melkor, stripped of rank and authority, approached Iruan as the Taelan delegation departed. Your prophecy, he said quietly. I interpreted it backward. Many prophecies carry dual meanings, Iruan replied without recrimination. Their power lies not in the words themselves, but in how we choose to act upon them. They would never have stopped, Melkor acknowledged, the full weight of responsibility finally settling on his shoulders. Because we struck first, they could not stop, not until justice was served. And now? Now we rebuild, Melkor said simply. Both what was physically destroyed and the trust that was broken. I will accept whatever punishment the Joint Tribunal deems appropriate. In the months that followed, reconstruction began across the Alliance worlds. The Temple of Spectral Light became the headquarters for the new Joint Cultural Exchange Program, symbolizing the transition from conflict to cooperation. Iruan, formally reinstated as prophet, dedicated himself to facilitating understanding between the two civilizations that had come so close to mutual destruction. Lyria, whose engineering background proved invaluable during Reconstruction, worked closely with Talon technical experts to redesign vulnerable infrastructure with shared security protocols that neither side could exploit unilaterally. On the anniversary of the Irani's attack, representatives from both civilizations gathered on the asteroid's surface to inaugurate a memorial dedicated to the victims of the conflict. The structure, designed collaboratively by Zalthor and Talon artists, captured light from the distant sun and transformed it into a perpetual aurora that could be seen from neighboring systems, a beacon of remembrance and warning. Iruan stood at the ceremony's edge, watching as former enemies exchanged ceremonial gifts and tentative conversations. Ambassador Navin, now elevated to Supreme Diplomatic Coordinator, had proven remarkably adept at facilitating the delicate dance of post-conflict diplomacy. "Your prophecy ultimately saved us," Lyria commented, joining him at the observation platform. "Though not in the way anyone expected." "Prophecies rarely unfold as expected," Irwan replied, his gaze distant. "They are guideposts, not guarantees. It is what we choose to do with the warning that determines our fate." "And what does the prophet see now, when he looks to our future?" she asked. Irwan smiled faintly, watching as Zalthor and Tyelan children cautiously approached one another in the ceremony's aftermath. Curiosity overcoming lingering fears. "I see possibility," he said simply. "The cycle of violence has been broken, for now, but maintaining peace requires more vigilance than waging war. Old hatreds can resurface. New misunderstandings can arise. So your work is not finished." "Our work," he corrected gently, "has only begun. The prophecy warned of what would happen if we struck first. Now we must write what happens after we choose to stop." As the ceremony concluded, delegates from both worlds departed for a conference where trade routes would be formally re-established. Scientists exchanged research that had previously been classified as military secrets. Cultural artifacts were respectfully returned to their places of origin. Small steps, Irwan knew, but significant ones. The path to genuine trust would be long and fraught with obstacles. The memory of atrocities could not be easily erased from either side. But with each collaborative project, each successful negotiation, the foundations of a more lasting peace were being laid. In the Temple of Spectral Light, Irwan established a new tradition. Prophets from both civilizations would meet regularly to share their visions and interpretations, ensuring that future prophecies would not be misconstrued with such devastating consequences. The first joint prophetic conclave produced a shared vision that spread rapidly through both populations. Two peoples, divided by stars, but united by wisdom, shall forge paths unknown to either alone. Unlike the stark warning that had preceded the conflict, this prophecy offered hope, a precious commodity after so much loss. Yet Irwan reminded all who would listen that hope, like peace, required constant nurturing. "We must remember," he told the graduating class of the newly established Joint Diplomatic Academy, "that prophecy reveals potential, not destiny. The future remains unwritten, shaped by the choices we make today." As trading vessels once again traveled freely between Zephyr Prime and the Talon homeworlds, as scientific breakthroughs emerged from collaborative research, and as families torn apart by war slowly rebuilt their lives, Irwan found himself spending more time among ordinary citizens and less in prophetic isolation. A prophet disconnected from the people cannot truly understand the futures that await them, he explained when questioned about this departure from tradition. "We must walk among those whose lives our visions will affect." On the outskirts of the capital, where refugee settlements were gradually transforming into permanent communities, Irwan established a simple dwelling. There, citizens from both civilizations could bring their concerns directly to him, not as supplicants to a divine oracle, but as partners in building a shared future. Lyria, who had become his most trusted advisor, often facilitated these meetings. Her practical wisdom complemented his prophetic insights, grounding abstract visions in everyday reality. "The future is never certain," Irwan would tell those who sought definitive predictions. "But understanding our past mistakes gives us the wisdom to avoid repeating them." The memorial aurora above Uranus continued to shine, visible from both homeworlds, a constant reminder of how quickly peace could shatter and how precious it was to maintain. For the children born after the conflict, it became simply a beautiful phenomenon in the night sky. For those who had lived through the war, It remained a solemn warning against the dangers of misinterpreted prophecy and hasty action. Mailcore, after serving his sentence of community service rebuilding destroyed settlements, eventually found purpose as an instructor at the Joint Military Academy, teaching not tactics of war, but strategies for maintaining peace. His first-hand experience with catastrophic misjudgment made him uniquely qualified to warn the next generation of military leaders about the dangers of pride and fear. "I misunderstood a prophecy because I heard what I wanted to hear," he would tell his students. That mistake cost thousands of lives on both sides. A true leader must listen, not just with ears, but with wisdom. As years passed and the wounds of war gradually healed, Iruan found his prophetic visions changing. Where once he had seen primarily threats and dangers, he now glimpsed possibilities and potential. The shared future of the two civilizations branched into countless paths, some leading to renewed conflict, others to unprecedented cooperation, but most to a complex middle ground where vigilance and goodwill would constantly be tested. On the 10th anniversary of the peace accord, representatives from both worlds gathered in the Temple of Spectral Light for a ceremony of remembrance and renewal. Ambassador Navan, now elderly but still sharp, delivered the keynote address. "A decade ago, we stood at the precipice of mutual annihilation," he reminded the assembly. "Today, we stand as partners, not perfect in our understanding or complete in our trust, but committed to the difficult path of sustained peace." Iruan, watching from the temple's upper tier, felt a familiar stirring of prophetic energy. Closing his eyes, he allowed the vision to manifest fully for the first time in years. He saw Zalthor and Tyelan ships venturing together toward distant stars. He saw joint colonies established on worlds neither civilization could have settled alone. He saw technologies emerging from their combined knowledge that healed rather than harmed. But most significantly, he saw a fundamental shift in how both peoples approached the unknown. Where once fear had triggered aggression, now curiosity prompted dialogue. Where misunderstanding had led to conflict, now it led to questions and clarification. When he opened his eyes, Lyria was watching him with knowing concern. "Another prophecy?" "Not one for public declaration," Iruan replied softly. "Some visions are better left as guiding stars than as proclaimed certainties." "And this one?" He smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen during the war years. "This one suggests that we are learning, slowly but surely, the lesson that nearly destroyed us, that striking first ensures the conflict never ends, but extending peace first creates possibilities neither side could imagine alone." As the ceremony concluded and delegates dispersed to various reconstruction projects, Iruan remained in the temple's meditation chamber. The crystal walls hummed with a frequency that only he could perceive. But unlike the ominous resonance that had preceded the conflict, this vibration carried harmonies of potential and promise. The prophet who had once warned, "If you strike first, they'll never stop," now understood a deeper truth. Peace was not merely the absence of conflict, but an active, ongoing creation requiring as much courage and commitment as any battle. The choice to stop the cycle of violence, to absorb the final blow without returning it, had proven more powerful than any weapon in either civilization's arsenal. Beyond the temple walls, on the streets of the capital, children of both worlds played together in the shadow of monuments to those lost in the war. Their laughter carried on the desert wind, a prophecy more profound than any Iruan could articulate, a promise of futures where ancient enemies might become indispensable allies. "If you strike first, they'll never stop," Iruan whispered to himself, acknowledging the truth of his original vision. "But if you choose peace despite provocation, you create the possibility that someday everyone might stop and begin something new together." And that, he realized, was perhaps the most important prophecy of all.